evening and welcome to Donnybrook. Next up, Bi-State Development serves the city of St. Louis as well as Jefferson, St. Charles, and St. Louis counties in Missouri, and of course Madison, Monroe, and St. Clair counties in southwest Illinois. Among other things, they are responsible for our region's public transit system, Metro, which includes our light rail and bus systems, and call-a-ride service. Bi-State is also operating the Loop Trolley. Joining us this evening is Taulby Roach. He is the president and CEO of Bi-State Development. Welcome, Taulby. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Ray.
You have been a topic of conversation on this program, so it's nice to have you here so that you can answer.
How's that New Year's resolution about staying out of the news working?
I'm not doing very well.
Now, you have made headlines. There are two topics that seem to be in the headlines. One, of course, always the Loop Trolley. Mm-hmm. I would argue more important probably is the north-south connector in the city, which we've also discussed. Would you rather we just talk about the tram at the Arch, though, first? How's that going?
Absolutely. That's going great. One of our best seasons.
Is it really?
Yeah.
And you do operate the tram.
We sure do.
You do at an airport and all kinds of stuff. But let's talk about let's start with the north-south connector. There's some, as there is with all things transit, some controversy, some question about where it should run or if it should run. Make the case for it and tell us the latest as far as what your plans are.
Sure. So, you know, no matter how you develop a city, and you develop a city like St. Louis, I think the transportation system always needs to be evolving and changing. And indeed, our system has changed tremendously since the 1990s. You know, originally the light rail station that was figured to be #1 was 8th and Pine. It's not 8th and Pine. It actually is a Central West End station. That's our #1 station. So that means that we should be developing light rail as the city develops and making the changes that are important. And certainly with the north side, south side line, it's really key that we make that development in conjunction with how the city is changing. And so we've recently looked at maybe tweaking the 2018 alignment a little bit. Running it along Jefferson Avenue, all the way up to the north at Natural Bridge, all the way down to the south at Chippewa. It's a very generous right-of-way. We would do a street running type light rail system. Would be able to have a transfer right at the red and blue line, so still able to go all the way downtown, still able to go all the way to the Central West End station as an example. And the really key aspect of this in how we develop our city is a simple, straightforward, straight line transecting the metropolitan area. Those quick lines tend to be very successful.
You seem to be on the same page with Mayor Tashara Jones.
Yeah.
Can you explain the role, I mean, I hate to say this, but the role that the pandemic played in maybe differences or different visions between Mayor Jones and her predecessor?
Sure. Well, one of the things that I've referenced is there was a 2018 study that was done previous. And of course, one of the things that has happened and has challenged all of us, people who develop cities, private sector people, the world has changed underneath our feet. And certainly the St. Louis of 2017 is very different than it is in 2022. And one of the things that we need to do is adjust that alignment. And I will say that Mayor Jones has had the vision and to look at something in a new way. And that has meant that we have been looking at this new alignment, capitalizing on some of the investments that we're going to have, including NGA. But one of the developments, huge development obviously, is that we're going to have an MLS soccer stadium right there within one block of what would be proposed light rail station. You know, look, that's the kind of icing on the cake in transit that's very important as far as the operability of these systems.
What's the timetable? What's the next thing that has to happen, and what's the timetable for doing the north side connection?
So we're still analyzing the route. Let me just make that clear. We haven't made any overall decisions. We still have to go to the MPO, present to East-West Gateway Coordinating Council. We have to do a more thorough job of vetting the alignment with the public, talking to folks, the affected neighborhoods, the various aldermen along the line, so that we can discuss it further. So we'll be doing that in the next 9 months. We'll do an interim report to East-West Gateway. I think we'll probably do that in August or September. We actually will have FTA in town to review the alignment, FTA staff taking a look at that. We've already had the regional administrator and have discussed it with him. And he thinks that the alignment has a lot of merit. We'll have to compete with other metropolitan areas to garner that very important money. Under the New Starts application, we're talking about getting somewhere between $420, $500 million of federal money to support this project. So it needs to compete. And
what do you say to people that say, you know, based on the trolley, et cetera, we don't need more money. You know, and also there's as a native St. Louisan, you know, people in our town just naturally want things not to change, you know, I think in a lot of, so when you say it's changed a lot since the 1990s, I'm guessing you get some pushback for that.
Well, sure, but of course, things have changed. We have the dominance of areas. Look, I like to say we're no longer, we don't build Corvettes anymore. And you two are old enough to remember, like me, that Corvettes used to be made on Union Avenue. This used to be a manufacturing city. But I would say as a Tier 2 Midwestern city, our greatest asset are contained in a lot of those educational institutions, WashU, SLU, and a lot of the research facilities. We have worldwide technology. We have the dominance of enterprise. So those are the future of St. Louis, and we need to be building off of those enterprises. And that means that the very fabric, the transportation fabric of the city should also change as well.
Can you share with us in terms of the shared vision that you have with Mayor Jones and the extension up to Natural Bridge? How does that impact businesses along the extension?
So yeah, no question. So the mayor has been a leading voice, and as a matter of fact, look, she has star power in Washington, D.C. right now, and so she has that ability to put St. Louis on the map as far as our federal partners are concerned. That's a really key talent. But additionally, the mayor has pushed to make investments in some of these underserved neighborhoods that have been ignored arguably for decades, and make some of these investments in areas right now where there's not a lot going on. And clearly a lot of that is in North City and some underserved neighborhoods. But then we have the densities all the way down to Chippewa. We have some really good, strong neighborhoods there that can help drive ridership. So what we want to do is change not only the transportation, but we need to have rooftops along the alignment. Whether that's where folks live or where they work, this is how you develop a city.
In terms of marketing and reaching those potential users, what is the most effective way to do that other than advertising on radio, for example? That was a joke, even though it's not a joke. No, but you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
How do you reach those people to let them know that this is such a marvelous alternative?
Well, I am not a marketing professional. I promise that I won't. I will. That's one of my confessions today. But I think part of what we have to do is build integrity of service. And you know, we talked about an earlier project that had a problem with integrity of service, even with the loop trolley. It's a very simple idea. People ask about what is the objective. The first objective is let's let it run. Let's let it run and be reliable. Okay, it's a simple objective, but I think it's something that makes sense. One of the things that we do at Metro Transit is we know how to run equipment. You know, we have nearly 1,000 operators who still, through the pandemic, showed up. I think they're the real heroes of St. Louis. They still showed up for those 4:30 a.m. shifts. They still move St. Louis. This is the fundamental economy of St. Louis. It still exists, and now what we need to do is build off of it. Transit is part of that equation.
You have been very open, I think refreshingly, about the fact that Metrolink has an image problem, a problem regarding safety. And one of the corollaries to it, I don't know, is the question of turnstiles versus, you know, not having turnstiles. And I was one of the people that I think got beat up fairly regularly because I read the security report, which really didn't think turnstiles were going to make that much of a difference. But now it's been mandated you're going to have them. Right. What can you tell people tonight that would in any way, what message do you want the public here tonight about security and safety on Metrolink?
So that's one aspect. look, we do need to listen to what the public wants. And the public wants, just like any neighborhood, I like to think of transit as a transportation neighborhood, just happens to be moving. But folks want security whether they live in Wellston or whether they live in Clayton, whether they live in East St. Louis, whether they live in Belleville. Everybody wants a safe community, including on transit. And look, if some folks want to say that it's a marketing plan to close the system and gate it, which we are going to do, by the way, we have garnered $10.7 million of private sector investment to do that, an extraordinary feat in our city. And I think that shows that we have the endorsement. But look, if folks want it, you want to call that a marketing plan to get more people on transit, okay, have at it. That's all right by me. My job is to get more butts in the seats, so to speak. I need to get more folks on transit. I don't not only want to make people feel safe on transit, but feel comfortable, okay? That's what our goal should be.
We have turnstiles everywhere, Taulby, and you've always been so great about answering these questions that are born of frustration.
Yeah.
What can you take us back to the decision not to have the turnstiles? And because that is something that people simply have been at a loss, and it's impossible for people to understand. But we're not transportation authorities,
Sure.
so maybe you could walk us through that.
Well, I can tell you what the logic was. We're moving from that model, but
Right.
the original model was, instead of spending the money on the hardscape, okay, is that you would then invest the money in, for instance, personnel, in security or police officers to enhance security and, for instance, do more. So the open system concept does not work very well if you don't make still the human investments in security. And they need to work in conjunction with one another. Even in open systems in a theater or at a stadium, you'll notice there's a heavier aspect of physical security, okay? So these concepts need to be invested in and deployed in parallel for them to work. And look, let's just be honest, it wasn't working. And if the majority of folks are saying they feel unsafe on the system, then we need to respond to that and change what our curb appeal is. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep making those investments, and we're going to charge forward.
And just not to beat that horse too much, but you did bring in some of the world's top experts on this, and they were the ones that said funneling people makes sense. Turnstiles themselves are kind of a waste. And am I wrong? That was their recommendation, and ultimately it got overruled because people here, feel more comfortable with turnstiles. I don't think the turnstiles are going to work myself any more than they did in the desert and blazing saddles. But the fact is, you got to do what you're listening to folks, and I think that's cool. Right. Let's shift to the trolley. Got to be a favorite topic. Bi-State stepped up and said, we can do this. We can make it work. Again, I'll let you just have the floor to tell us why so many people, I don't think there's any project that's ever had more skepticism in St. Louis than this one has. People just kind of viscerally dislike it, even ones that aren't paying for it. How do you, tell us what's going to happen and why people should be open-minded about it.
Well, look, we're a public agency, and unfortunately, sometimes that means that we're engaged in solving problems. This is a problem that we think needs to be solved. And one of the early examples that you mentioned was indeed the tram system up to the arch. National Park Service did not have a solution for that, and Bi-State was tagged with trying to make that solution work, and we did. This is an example of something that's very key. Look, I am being challenged with Northside, Southside to go and compete for those federal dollars. Compete for federal dollars. I just mentioned a project in Northside, Southside. We'll be competing for New Start's funding application from somewhere between $420 to $500 million. That's a lot of money. The default on the trolley is only $21 million. That's a lot of money, I get it. But having a default on the books means that as a region, and I'm sorry, I'm not very popular by saying this, but this is my opinion, having a default on the books regionally is bad for us. All of those trains and buses that I run, we get 80% of funding through that very region, Region 7 in Kansas City. We get our funding through that. And having a reasonable relationship with those federal partners is an important aspect. And I'm going to be going into that same office. And look, I'm about ambitious public projects. Not all of them work, okay? And certainly this one is having its trouble. But, you know, I think when you try ambitious projects, 5 of them, you know, maybe 4 will work well, and 1 might need some help. This one needs some help. We're going to stand up and do that our best that we can. We're going to firewall the funding and be very careful not to engage any of our funders' dollars, and try to run it simply on the tax basis that it has.
9PBS has asked the Twitterverse for their feedback, and they have been sending in a lot of questions, as you can imagine. Taulby, one of them is whether or not there is a commitment to the bus fleet.
Oh, yeah.
And what is going on in that regard? We think of balance. We're always talking about Metrolink, but what about the buses?
Oh, the bus service is absolutely critical. As a matter of fact, you know, in our bus service, almost 90% of our bus service is in Missouri and about 10% of it in Illinois. It's an absolutely key web into the overall transit system. And we have to continue to make those investments, whether they be security or whether they be in working on the rolling stock. In fact, our first all-electric fleet is in the number 70 grand, a great 14 all-electric, beautiful 60-foot New Flyer buses manufactured in Alabama, of all places. And those are out there making those investments. And so part of that, really, there's a lot of value to that 2019 study that, Ray, you read, and we're employing a lot of those spaces. And some of that is security and camera systems on the bus system as well. So we need to see it as an integrated system. I realize Metrolink often gets a lot of the attention, but it is absolutely true by the viewer that the bus system deserves as much attention. In
these tweets, there is there's an absolute sense that there is a disinvestment going on in terms of buses. Is that perception versus reality? What can you say to our viewers to put their minds at ease?
Well, it certainly is not the case. It needs to be seen as an integrated system. It is true that, like a lot of businesses, we have suffered having employees available to run our routes. And most of our employees operate buses. And so sometimes in the employment shortage, we have missed some trips. I would really prefer not to ever do that. We've had to cut back service, not because of funding, strictly because of having the employees available to do that. We have fabulous jobs at Metro. I'd love to get more operators. They're great salt-of-the-earth folks. Most of them have worked for us for over 9 years. It's a good job, but we need to continue to make those investments, and we will continue to do that. Whether it's in the rolling stock, whether investments in our operators, all of those things need to be done.
For those of our viewers who think I'm just puffing you up about this study, it was one of the most really sarcastic even criticisms. I mean, it was just, this was not your normal study that agencies get to rationalize what they're doing. It was a great read because they were so caustic about criticizing the lack of communication and cooperation between the various police departments.
Jurisdictions.
As well as, you know, basically saying, why don't you, like, tell your I don't know, I don't want to paraphrase it, but your security force to maybe, like, let go of the drug dogs and stuff, you know, and they were uncomplimentary at the time. What has changed since that study with regard, or do we still have that problem with police communication and cooperation?
Well, honestly, and it was a quality study because it was a fair critique. There was poor communications between our 3 professional police partners and Metro, and we had to own that. We had to see that as a problem. Look, I think it's no secret that our region has been haunted by that bifurcation of different regions. So we have fixed that. Our relationships are rigorous. I challenge anyone to talk to any of the sheriff in St. Clair County, the chiefs on either of the Missouri forces. We work together on an ongoing basis. We have a very clear understanding of roles and responsibilities. We are not the police. Metro Security is not the police. The police have their job, and we're not going to wrest our way out of everything. We also need to work on customer service and some of those other aspects and be friendlier to our community. There's all aspects of security and policing. Not all of them are the heaviest part, policing. Other pieces have to do with fundamental customer service. We've put mental health professionals on the Metrolink line, as a matter of fact, to try to enhance those services and see our community as complex as it is and to deal with the difficulties that we have. Look, we're an urban environment. We have problems that work on that are on the system, and we have to be honest and confront them.
We have had some email from St. Charles County wondering if that will ever be revisited, Taulby.
Which I'd love to build out in St. Charles County. Look, it's a burgeoning and growing area, but the real key is that the folks of St. Charles County need to do the same thing that St. Louis County and the city of St. Louis and St. Clair County did, self-taxing initiatives based on expanding the Metrolink system, or essentially the Metro system, I should say. And should St. Charles County do that, you know, by golly, I think we can expand the system and really help the future of St. Charles County. You know, we've seen some really interesting and neat aspects. Look, remember, we used to have 37 Metrolink stations. We now have 38. Why? Because we've seen the investments like Cortex. You know, I'll tell you, when I'm on the train in the morning and I look up and I see a Microsoft sign, I know that St. Louis is changing. St. Louis is changing for the better. I know a lot of people say that you'll never see change in St. Louis. I challenge that. I don't think that's true. I see the changing face on Metrolink and Metrobus, and I think we have a lot of capabilities.
The votes in the 90s on St. Charles County were not that lopsided. They're actually close.
Yeah.
But it's also something that, you know, you want to check out the weather down below before you know, there'll be another vote, sort of, in many people's estimation. Are there any discussions or any imminent thoughts that was from one of our many astute viewers? Is that even have you had any conversations
I
on
haven't
that
recently?
Yeah,
I haven't recently had any conversations, but I think the point is very important. You need to deliver. Part of North Side, South Side is that we need to deliver that investment that the public asked us to make. They're getting impatient. They're like, where is the line gonna go? And so we've been working very hard at making some progress. Mayor Jones, obviously, that kind of political leadership is unique. The partnership between the city and county is a really key aspect here. We didn't have that before, a good working relationship. Selfishly, that's very good for me. It makes my job a lot easier. So part of that is the political will. The political will to not only have a self-taxing initiative, but also leaders who are bold enough to try to step out and try something new.
In terms of security, getting back to security, we have had some email, people wondering what impact will turnstiles or gates on the platform, what have you, have on security in the parking lot where so many of the issues arise?
Well, yes, although and our police professionals were involved in the 2019 study, and one of the aspects of that was making an environmental control, essentially security bubble, that would be inside and would be easier for our police partners to secure. So it's certainly a legitimate critique. Outside the bubble, are you going to have trouble than outside in our parking lots and so on? One of the really key aspects and one of the ways that we were able to garner private sector investments was to also then enhance our video surveillance. So we would do state-of-the-art video surveillance, real-time camera centers that would be included, that would allow us to see not only our parking lots, but also looks into trains and buses. A lot of that technology is in place right now. All we got to do is grab it off the shelf, make the investments, and try to make every aspect of our system safer, including the parking lots.
I know you want to keep talking about the trolley, so let me ask you one more question, and that is, tell us what the specific plan is in terms of hours of operation and stuff, so folks, I don't think we covered that. What can people expect, and when can they expect it with regard to Bi-State operating, or starting up the trolley again?
Right, so we're going to try to be very careful with expectations, and okay. I realize that that's modest, but we want to be sure that we're starting at a minimum and analyzing the equipment and be sure that it's working well. So that's just a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday type operation, just on the weekends. It'll be free. We're going to start, I think it's August the 4th. We're just going to run for a few months, really, until it gets cold. This is a warm weather type operation. The equipment works well in that aspect, and we need to see how well it goes. Then after we have those, we have a little bit operating under our belts. We're sure that it is being safe, that it's been reviewed by a state safety oversight. Then we'll see how we can expand that envelope and do a little better of enhancing the businesses down in the loop rather than impacting them negatively.
So it starts August 4th.
That's right.
2 days after the primary. There'll be a lot of, politicians out of work that might want to help out. Maybe they could.
How significant is when you look down the road and you think, and we have less than a minute, but the NGA, it's going to be transformative, isn't it?
Yeah. No matter what, when a city is seeing that kind of a jobs investment, and I think there's nearly 3,000 jobs up there, no matter what, even if it's a highly secured location, and it is, it's a placeholder, a significant placeholder of stability up in that north city neighborhood that can provide, essentially bookends where other development can go. We have that obligation to run light rail service up there associated with maintaining all those jobs in the city of St. Louis. And I think north side, south side, the biggest thing that you do with transit is you try to capitalize on your existing investments, like MLS, like NGA. So let's do that.
Taulby Roach, we thank you so much for always being accessible, and we appreciate your time here tonight. On Next Up, on behalf of all of us at 9 PBS, have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for watching.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9 PBS.